All right, everybody. So ever since I became a backup administrator, every single day of my life has been worse than the day before. More data, more applications, more regulations. Which means when you see me, that's on the worst day of my life. Now, this is something a customer told me in regards to data growth. And of course, if you've ever watched Office Space, you see he was referencing that. If you haven't watched Office Space, you've got to work on your education. But data is growing quickly, and people don't know exactly how to back it up. In fact, if you look at the environments today, you can't just work harder. You can't just do a little bit better. You can't just tweak what you're doing and succeed with backup anymore. You've got to do something totally different. And that's why when you come in a place like AWS, the first thing you notice is everybody decides, I'm going to start using a cloud as my backup target because it's going to be cheaper and it's going to solve all my problems. And pretty quickly they realize it doesn't solve all my problems because I'm just doing the same thing with a different storage backend. In fact, I made it worse because now I have yet another storage backend. And so they very quickly pivot, as you can tell, to, the best way to solve the biggest pain in my life is to stop doing it. I'm going to get someone else to do the things I hate. And that's why backup as a service becomes such a win. And then once you're hooked on backup as a service, you think to yourself, man, I'd really like to do DR as a service because there's even more stuff I hate doing every day. Why don't I get someone else to do it for me? And when they come to that conclusion, they come to talk to us. As 4,000 plus customers have, with all that data under management. Because when you wake up, you say, Druva is a SaaS data protection company that takes the pain of backup and data growth off your plate. And more importantly, it's built natively on top of AWS. And I'll describe why that's important in a couple of slides, because there's a big difference between lifting and shifting a legacy application and pretending it's cloud and actually building from the ground up for cloud. Now, when we talk about SaaS data protection, how do you differentiate between people who say they're SaaS and what's actually SaaS? Well, there's the 4 S's you need to remember when you think about SaaS. The first S, you need it to help you save money. Because no matter what you do, if you go into your boss and you say, I've got this great new application and it's going to make my life easier and it's going to scale and it's going to do wonderful things and it costs more money, they're going to say, that's great, too bad. No. So step 1 in SaaS, you've got to be able to save money. Step 2, you've got to be able to scale. And that doesn't just mean scaling up, scaling out, getting bigger. That's important. But it's equally important to be able to scale down. Because especially when you're running in cloud, you're paying for what you use. If you're always paying for the absolute worst case scenario, you're paying too much. So a true SaaS provider is going to give you a simple fee that says, I'll scale with your usage up and down. Now the third S, that one's all about security. Because when it comes to putting your data in the cloud, you don't want someone finding out information that you yourself didn't really understand. And then that leads to the fourth S. The whole reason that you went to SaaS in the first place is I want it to be simpler. Well, simplicity means 2 different things. The first thing simplicity means is it's got to plug into your environment. If I'm simple in some sort of platonic ideal of what your environment should look like, but it doesn't work for what you really do, I'm not simple, I'm just taunting you. On the other hand, if I do plug into your environment, I can really work for you. And that leads to the second part of simple, which is I should just do what you need to do to be done. You shouldn't have to ask questions like, do I need more storage? What's my dedupe rate? Do I need more network? How do I manage all of this? Because the whole point of going SaaS is that I do it for you. All the pain that you didn't want to do, that's the pain I live for. I don't really like myself. So again, when you think of SaaS, think of those 4 things. Will it save you money? Will it scale up and down? Will it be secure? And will it make your life simpler? Now, I talked a little bit about, what's the difference between architecting for the cloud versus, lifting and shifting something to run in the cloud, or taking your favorite bits of your application and Frankensteining it in the cloud. The biggest difference is it's going to help you scale and it's going to help you use cost efficiently. Now, you can look at the patents, but the idea behind the patents is it expresses the innovation that's been done. Now, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to do a little bit of a technical geek out just for a second. So, deduplication. Now, it's been around for almost 2 decades. What new is there to do with deduplication? Well, I'll tell you something. Figuring out what data to dedupe and how to store it, sure, that's interesting, that's challenging. But when you get into the cloud, think about the back end of deduplication. At some point, you're going to want to delete one of your backups. And if you don't ever delete backups, God bless you, you've got a tough life. But if you are going to delete your backups to save money and also to get rid of data that you don't want someone finding later, in deduplication world, we call that garbage collection. You've got to find those things that you can free up. Now, when you run in an on-premises world, I can run that at sort of a light time of day, use the entire system's resources, recompute everything, rewrite everything. Hey, IOPS and CPU, they're mine. I do with them what I want. I'm in the cloud. Every time I run an operation, it costs me money. Every time I pull data back to read something, it costs me money. You have to architect deduplication differently in the cloud than you do on premises. If you don't, you're going to find you're spending a lot more money than you were expecting. And that's true whether you're talking garbage collection, or you're talking recovery, or you're talking searching for data to be able to recover it. So if you're really going to be SaaS, you've got to be designed from the ground up for AWS's microservices. Otherwise, you're going to find you've got serious economic issues. And that kind of leads us to, so why Druva, right? So you've got this SaaS backup problem. You've got a backup problem, you want to use SaaS to solve it. You've got the 4 basic principles of SaaS. Well, with Druva, the first one is the simplicity. You don't manage back-end infrastructure anymore, it's managed for you. You want that scalability and that cost savings? Well, because it's built natively on microservices, you're getting the best cost. You want speed, faster backup and recoveries, and most importantly, security. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So when you think of Druva, you can think of, we're going to help you solve your backup problem using SaaS. But that's really just part of a bigger story. Because if you're here, every one of you is on some sort of cloud journey. You're where you are today with some sort of data center. Maybe it's a data center, maybe you have remote offices, maybe you have endpoints. You've got stuff everywhere. And you're looking to do more and more in the cloud, either because your management's told you to do more in the cloud, or because you actually believe in the cloud, or some hybrid there between. Well, how do you get to that end state? Now, we've been working with customers for a long time. And in terms of succeeding on your cloud journey, it's a 3-step process. The first step on your cloud journey is you got to get a quick win. Because if you don't get a quick win, you don't build up credibility in the organization and people don't trust you. The second thing you've got to do is after that quick win, you've got to enable others to succeed in the cloud. If you're going to be a leader in your organization, you need to be the one setting the tone, making other people even more productive. And then third, if you're going to be the cloud leader in your organization, you've got to keep adding value. You can't just get one thing done and then sit on your laurels, because once it's done, and the organization expects you, what have you done for me lately? So Druva is a key piece on that cloud journey for you. So again, let's think of that first step. You got your cloud-based backup. So you want to get a quick win. So what better quick win than SaaS-based backup? Why? First, everybody hates backup. If you run backup, you hate backup. If you need to use a backup, you hate backup. If you have to recover backups, you hate backup. No matter what you do to improve backup, you're a hero, because it's so bad that people want something better. And then the second piece is, what's a quicker win than SaaS? As you're trying to set up your own cloud environment, you've got to ask yourself questions about security and networking and what type of infrastructure you want to run. If you start with SaaS as your first step into the cloud, that's off the table. You don't have to worry about those things. We take care of that back end for you. None of that complexity, none of that fear. So if you want step one, that quick win, SaaS backup's a great way to do it. And what does that look like? So if you think about it, you might have data, again, on premises. Maybe it's in your virtual machine or an application in your data center. Maybe it's an endpoint. You've got a whole bunch of users and you need to protect their data. You simply use Druva. Let's say, again, the VM case. We do the standard VMware backups using a proxy. It sends the data to the cloud for you. The back end of the cloud, all these pieces that you see, all this integration with the different Amazon services, that happens automatically for you. We're configuring the right type of storage on the back end. We're using the right tools to be able to store your backup data efficiently. And in fact, as you do your backups, you do your deduplication, you send your backup data, one of the nice things that can happen is as Amazon, as AWS itself increases their services, as they do more, Druva, because we're integrated with those services, can also pass on that value to you. So for example, today you might store your S3 your live backups, your active backups in Amazon S3. Great. Over time, AWS introduces Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive, a much cheaper way to store backups for long-term retention. We take care of pushing that data back to the long-term retention archive for so you get the savings, again, without having to do any management. The value of AWS passes along to you. And again, it's a great way to start. So a good example, I was talking to a company called Paul Corporation. And they're kind of the world's leading provider for filtration and cleaning services. And this is a big global diverse company. They work with aerospace, they work with oil and gas, they work with biotech. They got places everywhere. So they came to Druva and they said, we've got 50 different regional offices. Druva protects those remote offices for them in the cloud automatically. And so now they get to focus all of their energy and time on serving their mission-critical customers. They've started their cloud journey with Druva, and they're now doing more and more with AWS as they go along. So again, that's that first step. Let's get you that SaaS backup so you can get that quick win. So now let's talk about the second win. I want to enable others to run in the cloud. So I'd wager to guess that pretty much everybody at this conference, somebody in their company is running a cloud-native application. Now, they might not have told the IT team. They might be doing it totally on their own. If you ask them, they might lie. But they're out there. And most of them believe that everything's going to be just fine because stuff never goes wrong. And back in the old days when it did go wrong, they had the backup team there to bail them out. They didn't realize there is no backup team that's protecting them now. So it's important to protect the data that's running in AWS. The data, the environment. I might be using Amazon RDS for my new databases. I might have some data in S3 buckets. What happens when something goes wrong? Maybe I commit a change to my application that corrupts all my data. Now what do? The good part is, with something like Druva, you can actually say, hey, we can recover that data for you. And the best part is, it seamlessly plugs in because it's a SaaS application. So unlike the old days when they said, I didn't want to work with the backup team because it's the long pull, it slows me down, I can't get my applications built, you can slide that right in for them so it doesn't get in their way. But when it comes time to recover, you're the hero that saves the day. And once they know that they're protected, they can move faster with more confidence because they know that their data is going to be safe. They can come out of the shadows, as it were. And so that's that second piece. Your first step was, let's get the data into the cloud. Let's get this SaaS backup to get the quick win. The second win is, we're protecting everything that's running in the cloud so that nobody else has to worry about it. And then that leads us to the third win. And the third win ties us in a little bit with a company we also work with called Gulfmark. Now, Gulfmark is, they basically do marine transportation services for basically any of the major off-site energy kind of drilling locations. So they're pretty normal, right? They've got virtual machines with a whole bunch of data. They've got a lot of data in AWS. But what makes them a little unique is they have these transportation vessels, ships, that have servers on them. So in the old days, when something went wrong on one of those ships and the servers would die, and they would, they were out at sea for weeks at a time. Recoveries were manual, incredibly slow, and terribly painful. So Druva came to them and took them on this journey. And we said, yeah, we can protect your headquarters, we can protect your 5 regional sites, and we protect scores of these ships. And the result of this now is, first, recoveries are fast, simple, and painless. They've got 50% better backup and recovery times. And best of all, virtually everybody in their organization does self-service recovery. In other words, it's not the backup team's problem anymore when somebody loses something. They can take care of it themselves. And with that, that frees up the backup team to do that third job, which is, how do I keep adding value? How do I not get bogged down in just managing the day-to-day business? And the way you do that is you start thinking, how else can I use the data? Now, one of the things that's always struck me is there's not a company I've met that said, you know, I enjoy our backup solution so much. I'm so happy with it. I wish I could just spend more money on it because it feels so good. Been doing this for 20 years, NetApp, EMC, all the others. Nobody's ever asked me once if they could spend more. But if you think that's a hard conversation, imagine the conversation around disaster recovery. Okay, so you want me to pay twice as much so that in case something goes wrong, we might be able to recover, but we probably can't really test it because it's so complicated to set up. And deep down inside, I'm really hoping this never happens because it's the worst thing that could happen to my business. Yeah, I totally want to spend twice as much money. That's a great deal. Super hard conversation. Well, let's bring in the cloud. I don't need fully dedicated resources anymore. I've got my data sitting up in the cloud. That's great. I don't need standby compute because if a disaster happens, I can spin up the compute. I don't need the data sitting on expensive arrays because when the disaster happens, I can rapidly restore the data back to, for example, Amazon Elastic Block Storage. I can have disaster recovery at the snap of the fingers. Even better, I can test it whenever I want. Because again, scale up, scale down. I spin up my test, I show that it works, I immediately bring it back down again. I'm not paying a lot of money. So that when it comes time to hit the big red button, and nobody wants to hit the big red button, but if you have to hit the big red button, everybody in your team is familiar with doing it. They won't panic, they know it'll run. And the best part about the disaster recovery piece is think about the workflow we just walked through. It's the exact same workflow you'd use if you wanted to do test and dev, or data analytics, or CI/CD. I want to be able to clone my data in my compute infrastructure. I want to get my applications up and running whenever I want. I can do that at any point in time. And it doesn't cost me a lot of money because it works dynamically. And as you think about it, that's really where you want to be in the end in terms of adding value. Once you've got your data up in the cloud, in this most powerful compute infrastructure the world's ever seen, not only do I have compute on demand, but I've got access, as Andy talked about today in the keynote, to some of the easiest, most powerful analytics, ML, AI tools that you've ever seen. So if you want that step 3 in your cloud journey, that's it. Get your data to the cloud and unleash these tools against them to find out value that you never knew you had. So as you look, every day of your life does not have to be worse than the day before. Druva's got you covered in terms of simplifying your backup infrastructure. No matter whether you want to start at endpoints, data centers, remote offices, SaaS applications, or just applications running in AWS itself, we've got you covered. That can be your first step on the journey to the cloud. That can also be your second step on the journey to the cloud, protecting AWS. And then once you're there, unlock the value of data, and you can start to keep adding value to your organization. As AWS adds value, you add value. You become the leader in your organization for taking your company to the cloud. Druva's there to help you on the first step and every step after that. Thank you. And remember, so if you turn around, you see the Druva booth right there. It's booth 1115. We're giving away all sorts of good stuff. There's a bunch of really friendly people there that can show you demos of all different parts of the product. And the best part of all of it is there are free t-shirts and free socks. So you can be fully clothed whenever you want to be. Thank you, everybody.